Hi, everybody. I'm Ortolon, the Marketing and E-commerce Manager at Dell Outlet. And if you'd like to learn how to be authentic to your brand and not a can of beer, you can learn more on Break Free.
Hello and welcome to Break Free with TopRank Marketing. I'm Joshua Knight and I'm here today with Ortolon, the e-commerce and marketing manager at Dell Outlet. Andre, thanks for joining us today.
It's my pleasure, Josh. Glad to be here.
Now, we are here at B2B MX and you all have had a great showing here so far. How's your visit been so far?
It's our first visit to this conference, and we tend to focus on all areas of the business. B2B, we do business to consumer, we even service some large enterprise customers. So it's good for us to break away and really kind of deep dive onto B2B marketing every once in a while.
No, we worked together with you on a project recently that I think is super interesting to bring to our listeners. So this was a kind of a micro-influencer campaign, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, that's right. And it's really the first time we've kind of deep dived into that type of approach. We've always been involved in social media marketing. Even in the early days, Dell Outlet was a pioneer within the company in leveraging social media in a lot of different aspects. We were one of the first large corporations to have a Twitter account. And this was before my time. I can't take credit for it, but there was actually a Harvard business case written up about Dell Outlet leveraging Twitter and gaining a pretty large following and foothold. So it's turned into a great asset for us. And to partner with TopRank and bringing in micro influencers to not just push out our message, but kind of tie it in with how it's relevant to different audiences and have that credibility has taken us to the next level.
So we know influencer marketing means different things to different people. It can mean everything from getting Taylor Swift to hold up your bottle of water to getting the CEO of Cisco to write a blog post for you. How would you define influencer marketing as it works for Dell Outlet?
Well, I follow the same philosophy. I think the whole Kim Kardashian and Justin Bieber kind of craze is a bit transparent at this point. Even millennials or younger generations are not really buying that. It has to have a lot of credibility. It has to be people that are relevant to them on a more personal level. So that's the approach we're taking, is partnering with people that align well with our corporate mission, some of our value props. And so we have to look for ways that Dell Outlet fits in with the people that we're working with, so to have that credibility and also differentiate us from Dell, because we're a division within Dell. So we're not selling the same exact products. We sell refurbish and overstock, but it contributes to the circular economy, the environment. So finding those micro influencers that align with that, or value seekers, for example. So that exists across the consumer space and the business space.
So you talked a little bit about the circular economy. So were you also looking for people who aligned with you on a values, like a purpose?
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't have to be the most critical part. Not everybody's thinking about the environment when they buy a laptop, for example, or a server, but it tells the story of Dell Outlet. It helps even a B2B customer connect with your brand in some way that they may not have thought about before.
So for you, the micro-influencers, would you say they were a way of bringing kind of humanizing your message for folks?
Yeah, it served two purposes. So not only to humanize the message, but for us, we had a certain level of brand awareness in North America. So we wanted to increase that with this campaign, but as you mentioned, do it in a credible way and speak to audiences that were relevant to our business and our business model.
It's interesting to think of top of funnel, especially when you think of e-commerce. I would tend to think, oh, well, it's more about just on the page, once people are there, making sure that they purchase. But that actual awareness piece does seem like a crucial part of it.
Yeah, we've actually been surprised at the level of engagement and actually throughput lower into the funnel. We were expecting a social influencer campaign to be pretty strictly top of funnel, just making people aware of our brand. Maybe they learn a little bit about us, but not necessarily kind of taking that next step. But we've actually seen pretty good success in, getting them interested enough in what we're doing and our product to kind of browse our portfolio.
That's fascinating. Do you see a difference in the messaging for your B2B and your B2C audiences, or is it more just between different segments of each?
I mean, it's the same value props, and I think it's important to both segments, right? So, top of mind is going to be quality, especially for us, because most of our inventory is refurbished. So you've got to educate the customer on what's your level of quality, what is backing it up. That's important to consumers and to businesses. So I'd say for the most part that those value props kind of cross both segments. You're going to get into more specific details. Business products have more security involved with them. So, but top of mind, the top kind of things that we're trying to get across are things that would cross both segments.
And what kind of people did you end up working with? So what does a micro-influencer look like?
Yeah, so like one of the more interesting ones was an advisor for National Geographic. That's super cool too. You wouldn't think, oh, what does a computer have with National Geographic? But because she is an advocate for the circular economy and environmental technology, that was a great fit for us and something unexpected. And I think, you have to do things that give you a bit more visibility and differentiation, something that might make you pop versus seeing a typical, B2B banner ad or some B2B advertisement on LinkedIn, for example.
Just having those trusted sources that have an interesting story to tell.
Yeah, something that might draw you in and make you take notice. And then because we're working with micro-influencers, they have their own followers, right? So they've got a dedicated base. So having that content maybe published on their pages brings not only the credibility, but allows you to introduce yourself to that audience and show them why they might be interested in our brand and buying from us.
And what kind of content were you co-creating with them, or were they creating, or how did that work out?
It was a combination of both. I think the majority of the content came from us. We, built the outline and allowed them to understand who we were and what we stood for. And that's how it got started.
Just in general in marketing, where do you think the true change and the true progress is coming from?
For me, I've been in the industry for a long time. It's cliche, but technology is huge, and it's a big equalizing force too. So I think a lot of small companies can now benefit in a big way from things like, you hear the buzzwords like AI and machine learning, but that kind of thing is accessible now to not just large multinational corporations like us, but we're also a very small division with a smaller budget within Dell. So we're able to take advantage of business partners that have technology and engineers that create really cool and innovative ways to get your messaging out there. Social media platforms, right? You can, launch a company and a brand and turn it into $1 billion business in a short amount of time. I was at a social media conference not long ago, and they talked about Kendra Scott. She's a local jewelry designer in Austin, and she really got started going to local jewelry stores and just telling her story and making a connection with these more mom and pop shops, but eventually got into Neiman Marcus and then used social media and that platform to sell her story and make a connection with her customers. And she recently went public, and I think it's now $1 billion company. So, for me, it kind of boils down to taking advantage of things like social media, taking advantage of new technology and keeping up to speed with that.
It's interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way, that when we talk about doing things at scale, that, this enables enterprises to reach 20,000 people, but we don't think of scale the other way, which is what you're talking about, that a smaller business can punch above their weight really with technology.
Absolutely, yeah.
Was that something that you feel you've encountered?
Yeah, there's many examples of that, right? I think it even crosses industries, right? Like the music industry is able to, small artists can launch a song and they don't need to have a record deal anymore. It's the same thing for small businesses or even entrepreneurs that are just starting up. If they have the tenacity and the right product, they can leverage these tools and the technology. They don't need huge budgets. Just do it in a smart way to start building their brand and increasing sales.
So you can be the Billie Eilish or the Lil Nas X.
Yeah, exactly.
So this question is listed as what mistakes are you seeing in the industry? I would say what opportunities are you seeing in the industry? Basically, what are we getting wrong and what are the opportunities you see to fix it?
I think this is a trap that any marketer can fall into, is really getting into the day-to-day. We're all busy looking at how did our campaigns do? Did we drive enough traffic to the site? What was the conversion of your organic search? And yeah, I mean, there's so much data out there. We're so busy with emails and meetings that you can really get stuck in a rut and forget to take the time to step back and look at the bigger picture. I mentioned earlier that I'm a big believer in technology. So, really stepping back, looking at going to conferences like this one, for example, is a great way to get up to speed on the latest technology, to get information and ideas from people in the industry. So, I think that's something that everybody's probably guilty of to some extent, is getting too buried in the day-to-day and not really taking the time to step back and look at your strategy and educate continuously and getting up to speed on the latest trends.
So we talk a lot about marketing as that process of optimization, of always being aware of your results and looking to improve. But sometimes we do forget to apply that to ourselves as marketers, right?
Right. Yeah. You can optimize your organic campaign. You can make sure you've got the latest trending words, but you've got to also keep yourself up to speed and educated, like I said, and even looking for new partners and vendors that can provide something that you're not maybe expert on. So that takes a lot of time and effort. You've got to tear yourself away from the bottom line sometimes to get to that point.
There is that bigger picture. There's that idea of, are you laying bricks or building a cathedral? Yeah. That I always think of. It's so easy to get stuck in what you're doing and lose sight of the why you're doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. You also have to take stock sometimes and really look at your overall process. You can't always be in the execution mode. You have to look at end-to-end processes and making sure that you're developing kind of a holistic approach and not just selling a unit. You're building a connection with your brand, and you've got to think about your strategy and you're still aligned with that in what you're doing day to day.
Do you feel like you'll be doing more work with influencers, micro-influencers, in both the B2B and B2C side? I
think that's one way to make that credible connection. And I think it's an important aspect. That I don't know, is that a long-term trend, or will people gravitate to something else? Personalization is, obviously huge, and there's different tools to do that one-to-one marketing. Another buzzword, but I think right now social influencers, especially micro influencers, are a key component. And yes, we definitely will look for partners, but they have to be the right partners. We have to be a good fit for them as well. We can't just be, a can of beer that somebody from National Geographic is promoting. So it's a beneficial arrangement, and it lends credibility on both ends and helps you expand your reach and your audience.
I love the element of surprise in that campaign. Like you were talking about the National Geographic person, that's not who you would really expect to be delivering this kind of message, but it makes so much sense in retrospect.
Right. So it's just a way to highlight and make you stand out in a different way that's unexpected.
There was a Dell Luminaries podcast had an interview with someone who was a professional explorer, and they were talking about Dell and how and it dovetailed right in. He said, when I was on top of Mount Everest, I chipped my computer out of a block of ice and then I used it there. And it doesn't feel like something grafted on. It does feel organic to the brand.
Yeah, it has to be authentic, right? You can't just force fit something like that. So, and you have to be honest in your communications with yourself, with your spouse, with your boss, and also with your customers. That's one of my philosophies in business and in life is you have to be authentic, be honest, and incorporate that into what you're doing.
Seems like something that would carry pretty seamlessly from private life to work life, for sure.
Yeah, and people want to be spoken to in an honest way, right? They'll see through something that's not credible or not authentic, and people get turned off if they're not getting that.
It's that fellow kids syndrome. You heard of this? There's a subreddit called Fellow Kids that is just brands completely failing to reach a young. It sounds like there's a picture of Steve Buscemi in a T-shirt with his hat on backwards in a high school at his age, and he's going, "How are you, fellow kids?" And that's sometimes we can get to that point.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of recent pitfalls, right, with being a bit tone deaf or not really thinking about who you're speaking to and the way you're speaking to them, and are you authentic or not, and it can turn into a mini disaster if you do it the wrong way. So, maybe you really do have to be careful and make sure you're being honest and credible and not trying to be something that you're not.
That makes a lot of sense. So where do you see the practice of marketing evolving in the next 4 or 5 or 10 years out? What is it going to look like?
I think it's really hard to say because, right now we're talking about AI and there's all kinds of incredible technology out there with machine learning. And I hate to be trying to predict what the next trend will be. For me, it's really taking advantage of what's the latest and greatest now, because if you really think about it, is every company really taking advantage of some of these great tools and technologies? A lot of companies don't even have a social media strategy. Like they don't take the time to really sit down and put pen to paper and really execute on that. So, I don't know that I would worry too much about, what's going to happen in 10 years, but definitely take advantage of what's happening now, get up to speed on it, take full advantage of it. That'll put you ahead of the competition because a lot of people just don't take that time and that effort. I mentioned earlier, staying up to speed on trends can really pay off. Like for us, getting in early with Twitter has provided a huge asset for us that we can use as a launching pad for other things. So, educate yourself, try different things. Not everything's going to work out. Eventually, you're going to end up kind of landing on the emerging trend and taking advantage of something that'll give your business a boost. So,
I love the advice to get good at, get the most out of what you have in front of you right now instead of trying to figure out that next big thing. We can be shiny object chasers for sure.
Yeah, and I get bombarded with emails every day. Somebody that's claiming to have kind of the next best thing and offering to, pitch their ideas and their technology, but you've got to sift through that. And I think the best thing a business can do is really kind of get their house in order, making sure that kind of they've got like a full cycle and full, a complete holistic approach to everything they're doing and not getting too in the weeds. Don't worry too much about, what's around the corner. Just take advantage of what's here today.
Yeah, we were talking about the way that it can be easy to lose sight of you don't see that big picture when you're down in the weeds. I think that can also be part of this too, is if you are too busy, if you don't have a whole picture of how your operations are currently running, you haven't mapped where those gaps are. Is that something you've encountered?
It's hard to find those gaps if you're not kind of stepping back, right, and taking stock. So, and if you don't have processes in place, and I'm an OCD, so I'm a full believer in process mapping and making sure that you have guidelines in place for every member of your team, what they're doing, what they're responsible for, how does what they're doing fit into a larger strategy. Sometimes you can get into the pitfall of just execution for execution's sake, or doing campaigns or promotions or activities that are sort of isolated and not fitting into an overall process. So
it does, absolutely. So when you're developing those processes, is that something that you take to your team and work with them, or is it more of a top-down approach?
No, it definitely has to be a collaborative approach. They're typically the ones that are going to have the best ideas on how to structure something, and that's where you can also incorporate new technology, because we have younger people on our team that are up to speed on the latest collaboration tools, and they're smart people. They know how to take advantage of the technology and structure a process, and I can help out with, okay, well, how does that fit into our overarching strategy, or how do we incorporate the process that you're responsible for into maybe a regular overarching cadence on a quarterly basis, and how do we get aligned with our marketing agencies? And they might be in charge of a cog in the bigger scheme of things, but they should definitely be involved in how do we kind of operationalize that.
So they have the ideas that you can then help give structure and develop.
And how do we fit it into the bigger picture?
I feel like we keep coming back to that bigger picture, and I think that's probably for a very good reason. Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, if you get stuck in the weeds all the time, if you're always got your head down and trying to sell the next computer or laptop, you're not going to be innovative. You're not going to be competitive. Somebody else is going to leapfrog what you're doing.
I think that ties into our final question, which is always tricky for people, and I think by design, though, because this kind of an open-ended question that can mean different things to different people. Our Rorschach print of a question, if you will. It's how do you think that marketers can best break free? And that's however you want to define that.
So we're in what I would consider one of the more fun careers, right? It's creative and on the cutting edge. You're in front of customers. It's probably one of the more exciting places to be. And my philosophy is to have some fun with it. I'm in corporate marketing, and I have been my whole career, but take some chances, do innovative things, have some fun with it. And that's probably my approach towards life, not just marketing.
I like that so many of your marketing lessons apply just directly to life. Yeah. But it is, we've been saying B2B doesn't have to be boring for so long that I think it's time to start saying B2B can't afford to be boring.
That's true.
And we have to have that fun. That seems like an imperative to me.
Yeah, and I think it'll reflect well in what you're doing, what goes in front of the customer, because you do need to stand out, right, to some extent, and to try different things and to get out. I hate to use cliches like get outside the box, but
someday
try
somebody
something
will
different.
think outside the box for think outside the box.
If a team member has an idea that you think, that doesn't make any sense, maybe give it a try, and you never know if it'll pay off and can scale it into other areas.
Keep testing, keep learning.
Keep learning, keep testing, have some fun.
Sounds great. Well, Andre, thank you so much for joining us today. And how can people get a hold of you if they want to connect on social media or elsewhere? Yeah,
definitely LinkedIn is a great place. I'm happy to have followers and connections on there. I think it's a great tool for that type of thing.
So thanks for listening to this episode of Break Free. Thanks to Andre Ortolon for joining us from Dell Outlet. And please do stick around for our next big thing.